Harvey Smith, the co-creative director at Arcane Studios, along with Rafael Colantonio, and I am the creative director of Dishonored 2.
B, C, D, E, N, G, H, I, J, K, L,
So when you finished Dishonored and you decided that you're going to make a sequel, what were the kind of first things that sprung to mind that you really wanted to kind of build upon, develop for the follow-up?
Yeah, it wasn't obvious immediately because, you know, your temptation would be there's another rat plague or Corvo's got another misadventure a year later or whatever, so that you could stay in your Victorian, pseudo-Victorian time period, etc. But the thought that nagged me over and over was, Emily, what would she be like when she grows up? You know, she's had a fairly privileged position, but then her life was marked by tragedy. And I was like, wow, to play her, we'd really need to move forward like 15 years or something to that effect, because she was a 10-year-old girl in the first game. And so as soon as I had that thought, I began wrapping my head around what it would be like to have Emily Kaldwin, the Empress, as a protagonist on the run after a coup. And of course, at some point we also said, you know what, we feel very nostalgic about Corvo. One of our goals was to voice Corvo this time, and so in the end we ended up with Emily as the lead, basically, in terms of presenting the game to people. But in truth, it's a viable option to play either one of them. Corvo's back with all of his powers from the first game. They've all been extended and expanded with new interesting game mechanics for the upgrade trees, where you can solve your problems in improvisational ways. And Emily has an entirely new slate of powers that work in combination just as interestingly. They're both voiced this time. Emily is Erica Luttrell, who does an amazing job, and Corvo is Stephen Russell, who played Garrett in the original Thief. So he brings this kind of world-weary guy who's seen too much kind of quality to the character. Both are really great.
So presumably you choose from one of the protagonists from the outset. So if you choose to play as Corvo over Emily, are you getting a wildly different experience, or are they fairly kind of similar?
What we do is we let you play Emily for a couple of minutes and you interact with Corvo like that, and then there's an inciting incident where they're both standing back to back and you make your choice between one or the other. You leave the other character behind, you plunge into the game, and you stay with your character till the end of the game. The story and the missions are the same whoever you play. The dialogue of people aimed at you and the dialogue back changes, not just because you're playing Emily or Corvo, but because of the history of those characters. Corvo knew the gangs back in Serkonos because that's where he grew up. Emily, by contrast, knew the aristocracy from various court meetings, and so they have different perspectives on the world. She's younger, he's older, she's an empress, he comes from a blue-collar family. She's from Gristle, the capital city being Dunwall. He's from Serkonos, the capital city being Karnaca. And so, even though it's the same series of missions, they contextualize the story different based on who they are.
From a kind of technical standpoint, going from Dishonored 1 to Dishonored 2, obviously Dishonored PlayStation 3, 360, was making the jump to new hardware a bit of a challenge? Were you able to bring much across, or did you have to kind of start afresh?
It was a huge challenge. This was, as you say, a console cycle change. Dishonored 1 was heavily PC, Xbox 360, and PS3. Dishonored 2 is PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One. And we not only wanted to make the jump to the new consoles, but we also wanted to, we felt like we had very strong art direction before, but the rendering technology was a little long in the tooth for Dishonored 1. And so for Dishonored 2, we really wanted to upgrade the technology specifically to support our art direction and our gameplay. So we have this thing called the Void Engine now. That is, we started with IdTech, but we rewrote 90% of it. Our engineering team, led by Hugues Tardif, they just jumped in. We not only have the rendering to support the art direction and the lighting, the sort of stylized textures so that the game looks like a classical painting at times, but we also have, like, when there's a cinematic scene happening around you, you can drop a bottle and the sound alone will break the characters out of it and they'll come investigate what was going on. So it's a very dynamic kind of system. and we improved our AI search algorithms and things like that. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. One of the coolest things about Dishonored 1 was how you could chain together Corvo's different abilities. Like you could freeze time and then line up crossbow bolts and then unfreeze it and they'd all, die at the same time. With Emily, you got a new character and a new set of abilities. Do you have similar kind of ways you can link her powers together?
Yeah, it's always fascinating, as you say, because some of those things are obvious and some of those things are not obvious. Even the simple ones like freezing time, putting crossbow bolts on each target, letting time resume, those are very satisfying. But we have moments like, I see a rat passage, a little rat tunnel, and I want to take that as an alternate way to get into some room that's locked. So I summon a swarm of rats with one power, and then I use possession to possess one of them with the other. Yeah. Even that is just like a clever combination that is not scripted in any way. It's possible. Emily's powers get pretty crazy. She has a power called Domino, for instance, where you can link multiple people together so that they share a single fate. And players have already surprised us with it. They've done things like the 3 very difficult enemies in the room ahead, and you're wounded, so you don't want to fight them. But there's a servant nearby putting fruit out on a platter. So the players will do things like link the 3 fighters in the room with the servant and then go choke the servant out, because servants don't even fight in our world. You attack them, they die. You choke them, they go down. And the effect propagates from the servant to the other people that are dominoed together. And it's an exploit in an interesting way. We consider it gameplay. We consider it clever strategic play. And it's interesting because you can look through the lens of Emily as a character and see her powers as an empress reflect. Mesmerize is about holding a group of people in sway. Domino is about linking a group of people so they all share the same fate. And of course her life was touched by darkness at one point, so she has Shadow Walk, where it's a literal moment of darkness. And Corvo's powers are all back. You can do things as Corvo, like jump off of a building, and before you hit the ground, you possess someone walking by, and you break your fall that way. So there's just so many clever combinations, many of which we did not foresee.
Well, that's I suppose the next logical place to take the question then is when you've got so many systems and you're dealing with 2 characters now. Is it a case of it being a bit of a headache sometimes? Do you go into QA every day and it's like, oh man, this doesn't work with this now, and and then you got the AI on top of that? Is it a headache, or is it kind of exciting to see things kind of?
It's both. It's our QA team in Lyon and in Rockville. They work very hard, and they understand the type of game we're making, and so they dive in deep and they try all the combinations. There are days when we're just like, oh my God, how do we fix that? Or, oh my God, why is everything so messy around this? Until we get it cleaned up. But then there are other days that are just sublime. In the middle of a playthrough once, our lead game designer, Dinga Bakaba, he had given a bunch of journalists a tour of the Dust District mission. And they said, hey, our heads were down writing notes. Would you mind playing again? And because it had gone really well, our game is very dynamic, it's very unpredictable. Because it had gone very well, he felt the pressure off that he could just play around. So he did things differently a separate time. He used different powers in different spots, he used different approaches. And so he came to this firing squad where some religious fanatics, the overseers, were about to execute a heretic. One of them had a pistol and he was about to shoot the pistol. And on a whim, Dingo was like, what if I domino that guy with the guy he's shooting, just to see if it would work, because we had never done it before. And he linked the zealot and the heretic, and as the guy pulled the trigger and killed the heretic with the bullet, it also fired back and hit the zealot.
Right.
And the journalists in the room, even before he pulled the trigger, as he was setting up domino, there was a gasp, because they kind of foresaw what was about to happen. They understand the power, and they understood the power. And those moments make it worthwhile. Those are the moments where the player is genuinely not just following a trail of breadcrumbs, but they're genuinely playing creatively, improvisationally.
Yeah, discovering stuff that you guys...
Yeah, they're exploring not only the terrain of the game, but the systems of the game.
It's really cool. Talking of the terrain, are there places that Corvo can go that Emily can't go to, and vice versa?
No, we decided not to do that because our game already has so many different pathways through it. Like if you're just playing Emily, for instance, they're just in the Dust District alone, there are 2 assassination targets. You can either take out one or the other, or neither, or both. There are many different pathways through the world. There's a greater emphasis this time on rooftops, so you can go vertical. The classic example in Dishonored is you can possess a fish and swim along the river. You can go through the alley, you can go over the top of the building, you can go through the building. You can find that apartment off on the side that leads you where you want to go, but it's infested with blood flies. So it's already it's riddled with pathways, and so we decided not to do exclusive areas that only Emily can unlock or only Corvo can unlock.
Okay, that makes sense. When we last spoke, you talked to us a little bit about the achievements in the game. So obviously you had very creative ones in Dishonored 1. Has it been difficult coming up with Dishonored 2's list?
No, it's not difficult. It's super fun because by the time we start thinking about it, after alpha, we already have so many mechanics and we know how things work. We know what the highest vertical point in the game is, and we know crazy combinations you can do. And then we also have like a naming convention, like a style guide basically for how we would, like we're not interested in the collection mechanic, like find 1,000 of this. We don't care about that. We don't reward the player for, murder a ton of people. We try to reward for clever stuff. We try to reward for finding the kind of like edge of the game and doing something that we think is interesting. And then sometimes we just give them out for unlocking a new chapter or doing something that you need to do to advance, because some people just like that, right? Yeah. I finished the Clockwork Mansion mission, I want an achievement for it. Yeah. But then we throw down some that are like, you scratch your head at first, like travel this many meters in less than a second, and you're like, wait a second, blink won't take me that far, how do I do that? And so maybe you have to stop time and blink twice, or maybe you find another way to do it. Maybe you drop from someplace high. There's a great one in the new game. I don't think we've talked about it, and I don't know. It might be called Circle of Life, something to that effect, something ecological. But basically, in the same, because we have we have all of Corvo's powers are back, and they all have upgrade trees under them. Emily's powers are all new, and they have upgrade trees under them, and that's a change. That's a mechanic that allows us to go into the powers and let you customize them much more deeply and do interesting things. A good example is possession. Now you can possess blood flies, you can possess corpses, you can extend the amount of time you can stay in possession, and you can do things like chain possession. So if you're possessing a guard, you enter the guard magically, bodily, you're inside this person's skin walking along, and you pass another guard who's going another way, or that is another character that you want to be. Instead of a servant, it's a soldier who can pass through the wall of light. You can jump from one host to the other. Yeah. So there are upgrades like that. Well, anyway, there's an achievement now where if in one cast of possession you possess a human, a blood fly, a rat, a hound, and maybe something else, all in one cast of possession, you get the achievement. And it's like really hard to do, but it's interesting. We like things like that,
Yeah, that's the perfect kind of thing for an achievement, definitely. Yeah. We saw Prey as well earlier, which obviously separate studios under the same Arcane name. They said on the little presentation video that Arcane kind of specialise in narrative and simulation. Is that kind of what you set out to build a reputation for, and is that what you want to continue to be known for as a studio, like going forward?
Yeah, I guess the answer to both of those is yes. But the deeper answer is that, I've been in games 23 years now, and what drew me into games was a thread of games, right? Like I love many games, like, I'm playing Pokemon Go, Inside, and No Man's Sky right now. But my favorite games through history probably started with Adventure, the Atari 2600 game, and you could probably trace that to Dungeon Master, the European game that was first person but one square at a time, and it felt very systemic. But Underworld Ultimate Underworld by Looking Glass was the game that really lit me up and made me feel like this is going to be something important in my life. The way some people talk about the first time they heard the White Album.
Yeah.
Or The Cure's Boys Don't Cry or something, you know, like this Underworld did that for me. And so, yes, that is also true of Rafael Colantonio, the co-creative director at Arcane. And 17 years ago when he founded Arcane, I guess I've been there 8 years now or something, but 17 years ago, Raph founded Arcane in France with 4 guys in a small room, and it was out of this dedication to this kind of game that is part narrative, first person, very immersive, dedicated to simulation so that the player can play creatively. You're not just following someone else's trail of breadcrumbs like a chicken. So yeah, that's what it's not so calculated, it's more like our passion, it's more what we've drawn to, you know?
Yeah. And it must be satisfying to take something on that's so kind of open-ended and kind of a sandbox that you have so many things
Yeah,
to
it's an
play with.
interesting combination. Each mission in Dishonored is like a mini open world. And there's definitely a strong layer of narrative, but there's also very many different ways to approach it. And every time you pass through the game, I always say people really need to play the game twice before they even understand it.
Yeah.
When you pass through the game, I think you get about 20% of the content, because maybe you've played Corvo, or maybe you've played Emily, you've played one or the other. Maybe you've gone high chaos or low chaos, very violently or non-violently.
Yeah.
This is a game about assassins where you don't have to kill anyone. Maybe you've engaged with first-person melee combat, maybe you've done more stealth. But regardless of all those choices, oh, and there's also the pathways. Maybe you went this way, that way, or another way, right?
Yeah.
There's all these pathways through the levels. But then on top of that, if you play Corvo, and in one playthrough you spend all your runes on possession and bend time, you probably can't afford Bloodthirst, Bone Charm crafting, or upgrading Blink, right? So 2 playthroughs, even with Corvo, even if you're following stealth, would be different. I don't think any 2 Dishonored players, from beginning to end of this game is about 12 to 20 hours long.
Right.
I don't think 2 players are ever going to have the exact same experience or pathway through the game. And what it means is we're making so much game, and you can complete it by seeing about 20% of it. It's really an interesting process for us as well, I think, for the player.
Absolutely. Is there a single thing that you're kind of most excited about getting into players' hands when the game comes out?
We've added voices to the characters, like I said, and that changes things. But the biggest thing probably, besides Emily and her new powers, or Corvo and his revisited powers, probably the biggest thing is this approach to level design, where we're still true to our core level design philosophy of many different pathways, multiple solutions to problems, a realistic, coherent approach to putting the world together. But this time we've also added a big epic theme to all the missions, either fictionally or game mechanically. So we have quirky, high-value targets that you penetrate highly secured facilities to reach, and you can either kill them or eliminate them non-lethally. But this time also, many of the spaces have some sort of theme, like the Dust District. There are 2 targets, and these randomized dust storms hit that occlude visibility and change stealth. The mission called A Crack in the Slab, your powers don't work and you have a timepiece. You can look through time, see the other time period, move back and forth through time. 3 years into the past when the house was very nice. There's music playing, candles burning, guards walking around. Or 3 years into the future in the present where the house is ruined and pipes have burst and parts of it have flooded and collapsed. And there's another mission where by throwing a series of levers you reconfigure the walls, floor, and ceiling of the house like a Rubik's Cube. You can trap enemies behind the wall, you can open up new passages. You're manipulating the house as a means of advancing through the level. So each of these levels is that's one of the big changes. I forgot about it, but there's also no powers mode. When the outsider offers you supernatural powers, you can literally say no. So you can complete the game from beginning to end, flesh and steel style, by not having Blink, not having Possession, not having Domino or Mesmerize or Far Reach, just leaning, sneaking, fighting, sliding, climbing, and it's really an interesting challenge. Dishonored 2 will be available November 11th, 2016 on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the PC, of course.